Good morning, everybody. We would like to start the plenary. Because it will be a busy day. So please, if you could take your seats. And I hope everybody is still fresh and fruity for this last day. So we start with the reports back from the contact groups, and I would like to begin with the contact group on replenishment. So I'm not sure who will take the floor. If it's Mexico or Belgium, please. One of you can report back, please. Belgium, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. So, sorry, I can report to you that we had a meeting yesterday, but it will be no science fiction for you that we didn't finish exactly the work we were assigned to. So, we started examining the list of different proposals of new elements to be considered by the RTF. We are still in the process of doing so, so we would like to just ask you to extend some more time for us for finishing the discussion today.
Thank you, and indeed you made progress, and you will still have some time to finish the business today because it's quite important that we get the list. Then I would like to go to the contact group on the terms of reference for the quadrennial, the next quadrennial. Who can I give the floor? And I think it's the USA. Cindy, please.
Thank you very much, and many thanks to the group. We had good participation this morning. We have walked through the first part of the decision, the preambular and direction to one of the panels, and we're partially through making progress on working through direction to the science assessment panel. We have not yet begun our work on the technology and economic assessment panel. We have clarified some points, and we have a list of areas that will be added based on input from the group. We realize it's a very busy day today, but if the co-chairs and secretariat are able to work together, perhaps to find an additional hour, the group would very much appreciate that. We'd like an opportunity to at least get first reflections on all of the decision so that we can have good positive intersessional work ahead of the meeting of the parties. So with your indulgence, we'll ask that you consider if there is time on the schedule for even a brief follow-up discussion. Thank you.
Thank you by reporting back the progress, and you made good progress. Also the request to have some more time, but it will be indeed very difficult to find an additional slot. So by your understanding, I really would like to thank you for your work, but it will be quite difficult to fit something in today. So I think most of the work then has to be done, let's say, towards the MOP, which is, but I'm quite confident we can get there, and I would like to thank you for all the good work, and also Grenada for all the good work you did in the contact group on that. I would like to give the hand over to my co-chair.
Merci, Ralph. Bonjour.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ralph. We will call upon the contact group on the proposed adjustment to the Montreal Protocol to present the report of their work thus far. Thank you. Australia or Argentina, please, would you take the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and good morning, everyone. And my apologies, I was waiting for the interpretation to come through and then found I had the wrong channel. So my mind is a little bit behind the rest of the room. Just as a brief report back, we met again yesterday to discuss the proposal from Cuba, as well as the item on countries indicating they may be experiencing problems meeting the freeze and phase down targets as a result of the COVID pandemic. We've had quite good discussions in understanding the problems. Yesterday we were focusing somewhat more on trying to work out which countries were experiencing problems. A few countries have indicated who indicated in the information they provided to the Secretariat earlier in the year that they were thinking they would have problems, have now indicated that they no longer feel that way. So we do need more time to tease this matter out, and if there's more time during today, that would be greatly appreciated. But also the co-conveners would like to make an appeal to parties in this room. First of all, if there are parties who now wish to indicate that they are no longer experiencing difficulties or foresee they will experience difficulties, if they could notify the Secretariat. For those that still feel that they'll be experiencing difficulties, if you haven't been attending the contact group, I would really urge you to attend the contact group if we have time for one today, and would also urge that if there are countries, and we've heard that there may be additional countries who feel they are having difficulties, they really need to attend the contact group so the whole contact group can understand the extent and rationale of the problem. So I would make that appeal on behalf of myself and Juan, so we can have a discussion that gets the all the elements involved. So thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and I would look forward to having additional time today if you are able to fit it into the schedule. Merci.
Thank you very much, Australia, for giving us this update. We understand that progress has been made and that there's more information coming through, and the states parties which have difficulties, their issues are better understood. It is difficult to find some extra time. However, we will make sure that we find you a window so that you're able to continue your work, and that we will be able to have more progress with regard to this contact group. Thank you so much.
Je passe la parole.
I now give the floor to my co-chair.
Thank you. We go to the informal groups, and they met yesterday. So first on the strengthening of the Montreal Protocol, and I would like to ask the Maldives or Denmark to report back. Maldives, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. The informal group on strengthening Montreal Protocol institutions, including for combating illegal trade, met yesterday. Some parties in the group expressed the interest of preparing at least one CRP, and possible elements to consider in future drafting were listed, such as preventing illegal trade, licensing system, reporting system, and assessment of opportunities to strengthen the Montreal Protocol. As a way forward, noting the limited time we currently have, the informal group agreed upon continuing the discussion in intersessional discussions before submitting a CRP or CRPs for the consideration of MOP 35. The non-exhaustive list of possible elements to consider for future drafting have been posted on the Ozone Secretariat website. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you. A very good and very concise reporting back, and I understand you don't want you don't need time for a second meeting, as I understand, and you prepared a list of issues, and that list of issues can be annexed to the report of this meeting, and that will be then let's see, be forwarded also to the MOP. I would like to thank you, Maldives, Mariosa, and Denmark, Martin, for your good work for that. Also on behalf of my co-chair, thank you. I would like to give the floor. No, I hand over to Videme, please.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Ralph. We will now move on to the informal groups. The illegal import-export of some refrigeration equipment and heating equipment. I call upon Andrew from the USA or Tumau from Samoa to give us a report on the situation to date of their work. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Indeed, the group met yesterday evening, and we're pleased to report that a draft proposed decision was presented by Ghana on behalf of the African states, entitled Shared Responsibility to Stop Dumping of Inefficient Cooling Equipment Containing Obsolete Refrigerants. In line with usual procedures, the text was not negotiated as it was not submitted to the Secretariat at the time. However, parties were given the opportunity to seek clarifications from the proponents and provide general comments. And definitely we received very constructive reflections from the parties. And on behalf of my co-facilitator, we thank all parties for their spirit of collaboration. The CRP is now loaded on the meeting portal as indicated on the screen as CRP 8 for the parties' information. And Mr. Co-Chair, we are in your hands for guidance on the way forward as we are on the last day of our meeting, whether it would be possible to, if this is enough time for the parties to consider this in a contact group, or further discussions on this matter should be forwarded to the upcoming MOP. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Merci à l'honorable.
Thank you very much to the Honourable Delegate from Samoa. We understand that work has progressed well and that information's been received on the issue of illegal imports and exports. The Secretariat has received CRP 8, which was submitted by Ghana on behalf of the African group. I would like to ask the Honourable Delegate of Ghana to present to us this CRP. Thank you.
Play.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair, and may I take this opportunity to thank all the distinguished delegates who met at the informal group yesterday to give very valuable reflections on the CRP. The CRP is shared responsibility to stop dumping of inefficient cooling equipment containing obsolete refrigerants. Submission by African states. The 35th meeting of the parties decides, recognizing their compliance with the Montreal Protocol on the substances that deplete the ozone layer, and its amendment involves a shared responsibility between importing and exporting parties. Welcoming the comments of certain parties to prohibit in domestic regulations the export of cooling equipment not satisfying their national regulations and or standards. 1, request that parties manufacturing and exporting cooling equipment consider instituting measures involving shared responsibility to stop exporting cooling appliances with obsolete refrigerants and encourage the supply of next generation cooling equipment. 2, further request the Technology and Economic Assessment Panel to provide preliminary report to the parties at the 35th meeting of the parties and to update this report for the discussions at the 46th OEWG, providing examples of technically and economically feasible measures of shared responsibility where cooling equipment that is prohibited from use in a domestic market is also prohibited from export. This is the CRP that was presented. And just as the co-facilitator indicated, we defer to the wisdom of the co-chair for your kind direction. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
I thank the distinguished delegate of Ghana. CRP 8 does indeed deal with illegal import and export. What we would like to propose is that this CRP be transmitted to the MOP for its consideration, and that meanwhile discussions and consolidation efforts regarding the information continue. And I'd like to put to you this proposal. Would it be acceptable to you? You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Just as I indicated yesterday, there were valuable reflections, constructive criticisms, and valuable inputs, which makes the CRP a work in progress. So we do not object to your proposal. Thank you very much.
Je vous remercie pour...
Thank you so much for that agreement. So this item is closed. We move on to the next one, which will be about informing parties on the new CRPs which have been presented. CRP 5, which was submitted by Australia and Canada. Australia, Canada, please do take the floor to present to us CRP5, and then we will take a decision.
L'Australie, je vous en prie.
Australia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. As this delegate indicated under Agenda Item 3A, we would be working on a CRP in relation to stratospheric aerosol injection and protection of the ozone layer. As we indicated, I think at the time, we very much appreciated the assessment provided by the Scientific Assessment Panel this year. We took note of the recent UNEP report called One Atmosphere. We also noted that there was limited scientific information available on the risks to the ozone layer of stratospheric aerosol injection, and that there were potential for negative effects. So we have produced a short CRP, which invites the global scientific community to address risks and uncertainties for the ozone layer in any scientific studies or assessments undertaken in relation to stratospheric aerosol injection. And we have requested the SAP to engage with the global scientific community any important developments with respect to stratospheric aerosol injection as it relates to the ozone layer. In terms of the way forward for this meeting, Co-Chair, we are aware that this issue may not just be in the realm of ozone protection, the ozone community, and that delegates might need some time to further consider this CRP. So we would request that we take this issue up at the meeting of the parties and allow parties time to consider the elements in the CRP. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup à l'honorable délégué.
Thank you so much to the distinguished delegate of Australia. Thank you for the clarity of your presentation. Now we understand, or as we understand it, this CRP requires a certain amount of work to be done, and also that we bring in other forms of expertise which would enable us to address and consider this document. So we're going to ask you to perhaps represent this document at the next meeting of the parties, so the Secretariat has taken good note of everything and will circulate the document during the next meeting of the parties. I'm going to close this agenda item and give the floor to my co-chair.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to go to the CRP that was already announced yesterday by Switzerland, CRP 6. And please, Switzerland, could you introduce the CRP?
Yeah. Good morning, colleagues, and thank you for providing the opportunity to introduce our CRP. As we mentioned in our yesterday's intervention, we have the concern about significant emissions from CTC feedstock and other processes involving CTC. So other processes which are also indicated in the TEEP progress report. So we were interested in providing a path forward to solving this issue together as parties. And for this time, we think that we need to better understand the technological options that are at the parties' disposal to minimize CTC emissions. And therefore, in our CRP, after referring back to the pertinent decisions and the TEEP report with its principal findings, we suggest a single operative paragraph in which we would request TEEP to compile a list of best practices and technologies by process and by geographical region for minimizing CTC emissions and emission rates, and to indicate the minimum CTC emission rates that have been achieved in different regions and for the various processes. We consider that this additional information would be helpful to understand what we as parties can do together to tackle the challenge of CTC emissions. We invite parties to reflect on this and allow for a deeper discussion of this approach at the upcoming MOP. And of course, we are available in the meantime for an informal exchange. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Switzerland, by presenting this CRP. You proposed already a way forward, and I think that's indeed a good idea to have a discussion at the next MOP on this issue, based also on your CRP. And if there are no other comments from the room, I would like then to close this, but indeed parties can be involved in discussions till the next MOP, till it comes back. Yes, then I would like to hand over again to Videme. Sorry, I think India is on the list. Sorry, I was a little bit too quick. India, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and very good morning to all. We thank the delegate of Switzerland for introducing the CRP. Mr. Co-Chair, in response to Decision 34/6 of the MOP, MCTOC of the TEEP provided information on best practices followed to control emissions. So in this context, we would like to understand how it would address the processes followed in various regions and how it would assess the emission rates achieved based on the available information. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Please, Switzerland, could you answer that question?
Thank you to the Indian delegation for bringing forward this question. We read in the TEEP report a generic list of best practices and for different feedstock processes, which might be a very good starting point, but which in our view do not yet consider the potential difficulties that specific processes might need to consider, or which even in specific geographical region might exist. So we do not know if there are what could be the particular issues there, but we would like really to get a picture that would really help us to move path forward and understand potential difficulties that arise for very specific situations, so that we really have a way forward how to go. I'm not sure if I could address sufficiently the question by the Indian delegation, but I'm also happy to exchange informally after the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland, and look to India if this clarification is, if you need some more information or if that's okay.
Thank you, Co-Chair, for giving the floor again. So we would like to discuss this, and definitely we can discuss it in further detail in the next mock. Thank you.
Thank you. So then what I concluded, it can be discussed at the next MOP, and parties can have then still some time to get in touch with each other for this meeting in Nairobi. Then I close this item, and then I definitely would like to go to my co-chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ralph. Let us now move swiftly on to CRP6, which tackles the issue of abating emissions of carbon tetrachloride. It was submitted by Switzerland, and I would like to invite the distinguished delegate of Switzerland to present to us this CRP.
Veuillez nous excuser.
Now, I apologize, but we're going to move on to feedstocks first. I'm here referring to CRP7, which concerns these feedstocks, and I'm going to invite Australia to present this to us.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. Yes, Australia is happy to present this CRP. We recall that at your direction, we were encouraged to develop a CRP at this meeting, and actually prior to the discussions we had hoped we would undertake before developing the CRP. So unfortunately, this CRP has not had the benefit of the type of consultation we would normally like to undertake before presenting it. But we have had some consultations, but certainly we appreciate that we have not consulted with all parties who might be interested in this CRP. As delegates will recall, the scientific assessment panel listed 3 issues that would be of most importance for parties to undertake, and one of those was addressing the issue of feedstocks, which is why we have brought forward this CRP. So essentially we are building on the few previous decisions that have been taken on this issue, in particular decision 412, in which parties were urged to minimise their emissions of feedstock substances, and we reiterate that that decision that was taken perhaps nearly 30 years ago, so maybe it's a good time to have a reminder of that decision to take steps to minimise emissions of ODS substances produced or used as feedstock. And then we build on that by encouraging parties to replace, where technically feasible, the use of ODS with non-controlled substances in feedstock manufacturing processes or in the production of processes currently relying on ODS. We did hear from the Medical and Chemical Technical Options Committee some confusion about whether isolated and non-isolated intermediates, which are ozone-depleting substances, should be reported as production, and we understand that this has already been agreed, so it is a reminder to parties to include the unintentional production of these intermediates in their production reporting where such production is measurable. And we are conscious that in some cases those intermediates have a very short life as intermediates. Then we thought it might be interesting to invite parties to provide information on their domestic policies, practices and regulations relating to the management of feedstocks produced and their use of feedstocks, including any controls on the emissions to the Ozone Secretariat, because we think that might be a useful way of building knowledge amongst parties about systems and practices that are already in place for addressing this issue, and then requesting the Ozone Secretariat to summarise that information for our consideration next year. And then just requesting the TEEP to consider, sorry, I should note that actually I've got a date in brackets in paragraph 4, which obviously we need to revise. But then asking the TEEP to prepare a report for us next year on information on alternative chemicals and processes that can be used or implemented to reduce the need for feedstock production or the use of controlled ODS in feedstock uses, and then to provide estimates of global emissions of ODS by species from feedstock production. I think there is a lot of information, a lot of emission factors in various places, and we considered it would be a good idea to try and bring some of that information together. So that is the scope of the CRP. We are very happy to engage with other parties today as we have time. Informally, we would be happy to have a group to talk about the CRP, but we are conscious that time is short. So we're in your hands, co-chair, in terms of the way you'd like to take this forward, but obviously we will need some time to consider the CRP, and we're happy to do so at the MOP if that is the way forward. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Merci beaucoup à l'honorable.
Thank you so much to the distinguished delegate of Australia. This CRP 7 invites all parties to lend information they might possess or share information that they might possess regarding stocks of these substances, because thus far the information available is not of the highest quality, but what is required is sound data. Australia has been very proactive, submitted the CRP for our consideration, and it will be considered during the next meeting of the parties. However, discussions can, of course, be initiated starting right after this meeting. We don't have that much time left. Delegates are mostly already busy in various contact groups, or working groups rather. We have contact groups, we have informal groups. So they are busy, but I am certain that opportunities will arise to engage in exchanges on this issue. So our suggestion, our encouragement, or our suggestion is to encourage you to continue to engage in parallel discussions to ensure that when we meet in Nairobi for our formal discussions and considerations, we're in a position to engage in them. Having said all this, I would like to give the floor to you, as well as to all the other parties, to enable them to speak to this matter. And I already see India on my list. India, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We thank the delegate of Australia for introducing the CRP on feedstock uses. Mr. Co-Chairs, parties may note that Para 4 of Article 1 to the Montreal Protocol defines the controlled substance as a substance whether existing alone or in a mixture. It includes the isomers of any such substance except as specified in the relevant annexure, but excludes any controlled substance or mixture which is in a manufactured product. Further, para 5 of the Montreal Protocol defines production as the amount of controlled substances produced minus the amount destroyed by technologies to be approved by the parties. In this, we minus the amount entirely used as feedstock in the manufacture of other chemicals. Accordingly, feedstock is not controlled under the provisions of the Montreal Protocol. However, as per the provisions of Article 7 to the Montreal Protocol, reporting of feedstock is done annually by the concerned parties. Mr. Co-Chair, Decision 4/12 of the MOP clarifies that insignificant quantities of controlled substances originating from inadvertent or coincidental production during a manufacturing process or from their use as process agents which are present in chemical substances as trace impurities or that are emitted during product manufacture or handling shall not be covered by the definition of a controlled substance contained in paragraph 4 of Article 1 of the Montreal Protocol. ODS used as feedstocks are fed directly into the processes as a raw material stream or as an intermediate in the synthesis of another product. Intermediates are stored and used at the same site. Considering the national frameworks and processes which are in place, fugitive leaks or losses are almost negligible. Mr. Co-Chair, on perusal of the information summarized by the Medical and Chemicals Technical Options Committee in its 2023 progress report, based on information submitted by a few parties, we feel that most countries have effective process for management of CTC production for use as a feedstock, and accordingly, we feel that MCTOC should propose ways for strengthening capacities of parties wherever needed on strengthening such processes rather than adding additional burden on the parties. Mr. Co-Chair, regarding the CRP, as this was posted around last midnight, we need time to study the various proposed elements in more detail and also examine the implication of these elements on the stakeholders, which would be possible only through an inclusive consultative process at our domestic front. And that, because of that reason, it may not be possible, according to us, at this meeting. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Je remercie.
I would like to thank the distinguished delegate of India. We're going to continue now. We have, of course, taken good note of the statement which was just made. And we're now going to turn to the room and ask whether any other party would like to take the floor. I see no one on my list. Australia, do you have anything to add, perhaps? Otherwise, we will conclude this agenda item. You have the floor. Australia, you have the floor.
Après Canada et la Chine.
Followed by Canada and then China.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, and we thank India for their comments and their observations. We do understand the concept that emissions from feedstock uses should be negligible, but indeed, as we saw from the information provided by the TEEP, that in fact feedstock uses are increasing significantly year on year, and even small emissions from feedstock processes or use of feedstocks add up as those uses increase. And so it does appear to us that the emissions from feedstock production and or use are no longer negligible, and we should be thinking as parties about how we can better address those emissions. We do take the points on board that India has made, but we think, and we appreciate their willingness to look at the CRP between now and the meeting of parties. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup à l'honorable.
Thank you so much to the distinguished delegate of Australia. Now, before I give the floor to Canada, followed by China, I would like to make a small clarification. We had already come up with a way forward, which was to circulate this CRP at the MOP for more in-depth discussion and consideration. At this stage, we don't wish to engage in in-depth, substantive discussion on this CRP. Having said this, the parties can, of course, take the floor to make any general comments they might have. So, Canada, please be both concise and precise.
Merci, Monsieur le Co-président.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair.
Je...
Now, am I not concise in my usual life? Well, if not, I'll attempt to do this. No, we back the approach which you have just suggested for our future consideration of this proposal. We don't wish to add anything to this. No, we merely wanted to voice our interest and our general support for this proposal. We believe that it is a highly interesting one. It is one on a topic which is highly relevant to the Montreal Protocol right now. We also wish to underscore that there are links with CRP 6, which was presented by Switzerland just a few minutes ago, on carbon tetrachloride, given the fact that carbon tetrachloride is to a large extent used as a feedstock, and this is a CRP on feedstock uses. So when we come to consider it, I believe that it will be important to consider them together. I'm referring to Switzerland's carbon tetrachloride proposal and, of course, Australia's proposal. And Australia, thank you again for your proposal. The Chair, thank you so much, distinguished delegate of Canada. I'll take China, and then we'll close the list. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We thank the Australian delegation for proposing this CRP document. Our delegation just saw this document this morning, so we may need more time for further study and research. Now, I would like to make some preliminary response to this CRP. First of all, we would like to thank the Australian delegation for providing the delegation with Decision 12 in 1992. And we note that the title of this decision is Clarification of the Definition of Controlled Substances, which means that the decision back then, the main conclusion of that decision is substances for feedstock use is not controlled under the Montreal Protocol. Therefore, we must take note of this definition in this decision. Substances which is not under control of the protocol, while we are trying to control that, we must fully consider the industry practices and the requirement from the industry. Additionally, in the last 35 years, the parties have made many decisions. If those decisions has not been overridden by other decisions, all those decisions are actually valid. And we do not need to reiterate those decisions which already have been made before. And we do not need to remind the parties again of those definitions that already have been acknowledged in previous decisions. Therefore, we feel that the contents of this CRP should be reflected. Thirdly, in this CRP, it has some sentences regarding the technical alternatives. I think in the industry, no enterprises would intentionally increase the emissions from feedstock. If there are such emissions, they must face with economical or technical challenges, and they have no other alternative. While we're trying to find alternative solutions, we must also consider the technical and as well as the economic feasibility of those alternative technologies and how much impact it will bring to industry players. Therefore, in this respect, we must consult fully and thoroughly with industry players and hear their voices. I thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Merci à l'honorable.
Thank you so much to the distinguished delegate of China. European Union, you have the floor, and we will conclude after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. The European Union would like to thank Australia for submitting this very important CRP, and we would like to participate in any consultation which may take place either still today or intersessionally, but we would also share the opinion voiced by Canada that here we should look at potential synergies with the equally welcome proposal made by Switzerland as CRP 6, and we would be happy to see it moving forward in Nairobi. Without going into the substance yet, we heard already some points which will certainly be discussed in depth in the future contact group on this issue. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup à l'Union.
Thank you so much to the European Union. Now at this stage, we're going to close the list of speakers. And we're going to just quickly summarize all of the CRPs which were submitted to the Secretariat for our consideration. So we have 3 of them: CRP 5, CRP 7, and CRP 6, not necessarily in that order. These will be submitted to the MOP for consideration. So we have now concluded this point.
Nous allons, le secrétaire.
The Secretariat has an announcement to make. And for this reason, we're going to give the floor to the Secretariat for the aforementioned announcement.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Good morning, delegates. The Secretariat would like to inform you all that the list of participants for this meeting has been posted on the meeting portal under the Post-Session Documents tab. The password is on the screen. It's OEWG45 LOP, OEWG in lowercase and LOP in uppercase. We would request that you review the LOP and submit any corrections to us by 14 July, and the email address is also on the screen. The final LOP with all the corrections will be posted on the meeting portal on 21st July. It will be in the same, under the same tab, post-session documents. We are also happy to inform that the DSA issue was resolved yesterday. While the delay is regretted, we appreciate the patience of our delegates, our funded participants. Thank you all.
Merci.
Thank you very much, the Secretariat. We will now adjourn the plenary and we'll go back into our contact and informal groups. The informal group on very short-lived substances, the informal group on gaps in monitoring, the contact group on HFC 23, the contact group on the proposed adjustments to the Montreal Protocol, and the contact group on the replenishment report. Thank you so much for your attention. At the same time, allow me to clarify the facilitators for the informal group on very short-lived substances. the Honorable Delegate Yana Masikova and Liana Garamanyan from Armenia for the informal group on gaps in monitoring. This will be led by Sandrine Bernard from Norway and Anna Maria Clemea from Micronesia. These will be the main facilitators. And for the contact groups that I mentioned before, those who are leading it are well known to you. Thank you.
Donc, veuillez de temps en temps
Please do check the screens for any further information. You will receive updates to guide you on the work of the different contact and informal groups and on the side events. Wishing you success in your work, and we will meet again in the plenary this afternoon.